got a bunch of strangers.
John's not shy.
All right, so thanks, Mick. That reminds me why I'm glad I'm a bookstore owner and not doing what I used to do. Our next reader is John Domini. John is here to celebrate the release of his book. Unfortunately, only a handful of them got here, so we can have a wrestling match after the reading for who gets them. Supposedly there were 8 more FedExed yesterday, that because John has more pull than I do, obviously, but I think between Sunday and Veterans Day we're struggling with even FedEx. But so the books are on order, and they will be in the store within the next 48 hours if you don't get one today. But John's latest book is The Color Inside a Melon. Set in Naples, Italy, the novel completes a loose trilogy. John is also the author of 3 books of stories, the latest being MOVIEOLA, which we do have a couple of copies of. His criticism has appeared in New York Times and elsewhere. His awards include an NEA Fellowship and an Iowa Major Artist Grant. John?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Malvern. What a great community you built here. Mick, how wonderful to hear you raging again. That's terrific. You all should also take a look at the book, Mick's first book, I believe. If I'm wrong about that, correct me. That Demon Life, which I was very happy to select as the winner of the Cheval Press contest some years ago. Hilarious and all about Austin. He broke a number of rules in his reading, and I'm going to break rules in mine, and why not? Independent bookstore and all that. The rule when you're reading from a fairly complex novel with a lot of plot engines going at once is that you read from the beginning, right? So people don't have to play catch up all the time. I'm going to actually read from a little more than halfway through, I've decided. And I'm going to give you just enough to make it work. I just felt this singing would work best here in Malvern. Now, the protagonist that we're going to be working with here is named Risto, for Aristofano, which is an Italian adaptation of a name out of the Backul hills of Somalia. Risto is a Somali refugee come to Naples, Italy, like untold thousands of others, and he is one of the rare lucky cases. He has managed to make good. He has an Italian wife, a crucial linchpin in achieving citizenship. He has a successful business, an art gallery. Where the money comes from, that's another story. But the Somali runs an art gallery and moves in the circles of the arts, which in Naples and most of Europe include performance artists, fairly speedy circles. And he is fleeing just now a mighty mess back in Naples. There is a murder mystery in the book. Another clandestino, as they're called, clandestine, illegal immigrant, has been murdered, and Risto, for reasons he doesn't entirely understand, has involved himself in the investigation. And just now, on top of that, his only semi-relative in Naples, another Somali, a Klansman named Efta, has been found murdered too. Quite a flamboyant Klansman. He's been found murdered. So Risto has been told by the detective on the case, you've got to get lost. You've got to get out of town. And I happen to know that your wife is down a town called Agropoli, south of Naples. Why don't you go down and visit her? And here is Risto responding to these at the beginning of a new chapter. On the island ferry, note the island, the upper deck, Risto had a bench to himself. It was therapy, alone in a breeze full of salt and fermentation. For this trip, he preferred the slow boat, a fat old traghetto. The low-slung hydrofoils made for a shorter journey, but they didn't have the deck space. If you did find a seat outside, you risked getting your phone doused by spray. The gallery owner intended to use his phone. The calls, just a couple, wouldn't be too hard on him. But till now, he'd put them off. They hadn't seemed reason enough to stop moving. He'd skipped swinging by the apartment, driven to get some distance, some perspective. At his back, besides, he had the detective, della figurazione, him with some powerful dreams going about this case, maybe a transfer, maybe a job in Milan. The last thing this officer wanted was some hyperactive Nero in the way. But then Risto himself was sick of his hyperactivity. The getaway mattered more than a change of shirt and underwear. Topside on the ferry, for some reason, you caught the communications boomerang better than on a beach. You know this, right? You know how a cell phone sometimes at a beach, its signal is messed up. You know about this? But on the ferry, you caught the boomerang better. Risto got a connection, clear as a bell, on his first call, the one out to the island. In no time, he confirmed that he was welcome, and therefore in his right mind. His man on Capri remained the same as ever, sharing the house with a lady friend. She wasn't one of those who preferred to go unseen either. And for Risto, they would pull together a party. At this, the man who just invited himself over had no choice but to sound pleased. Maybe he was, anyway. Maybe island-style debauchery, more understated than the city version, would be good for him. After all, the ride across the Gulf looked like 45 minutes of solo meditation. Before the second call, he needed a moment more, trying to force down one of the shipboard panini. Bad idea. The sandwich might have dated back to the Crusaders. Marauding knights like those who put up the Castel dell'Ovo, the hulking waterfront keep. You got a great view as the ferry pulled away, and come to think, that castle had a lot in common with Risto's attempt at lunch. It had a color you might call desiccated bread, if not ham past expiration. Worse, the humpbacked medieval warren was a drain on the city. Every administration tried out something new. Last year, an arts venue. This summer, a prison. Dell'Ovo had been the only place the police could find for locking away some immigrant protesters. Anyway, somewhere amid Dell'Ovo's decaying brick, undoubtedly there lay the fossilized remains of the other panini put together the same day as this one. Per carità, the Crusaders had no idea about food to begin with. What did they eat, those blonde demons? Bones and meat? They'd been boat people, pirates, yet they'd had the nerve to claim Naples as northern and white. Risto fought down a couple of bites, half an arancina. The next call was to Paola, his wife, Paola, and once he'd given up on the panino, he needed only a moment more, a scroll through his photos, when a stranger took him by surprise, an African woman sliding in beside him. She had no need for black folks' radar to see she wasn't interrupting. She noticed the photos, too, the kids mostly, grinning hugely. With their complexions, the smile could have been a halo slid down to the middle of the face. The woman nodded and cooed, "Aren't you the lucky father?" Her Italian, husky, passable, could have come from a dozen different countries on the other side of the Mediterranean. Her Italian could have come from dozen different countries. Why, they're dolls, just perfect dolls. Risto didn't so much as raise his eyes, but she kept on. "You ought to thank your lucky stars. One day soon, you mark my words, these two will make you rich." Maybe she had some radar after all. They'll make you millions in the fashion magazines. Dubious as Risto found these compliments, he made a note to share them with Paola. He hid behind his arancina and took in his uninvited guest. A woman no longer young, but slender and flexible and fresh from a shower. Her dress was a wraparound, its colors a match for one of his splashiest West African shirts. Okay, benefit of the doubt. "The fashion magazines," he said. "Oh, sir, you must have noticed. They're all the rage these days. Mulattoes." Wherever she'd gotten the dress, she'd been careful to choose a forgiving fit. Her chest was so flat, you thought of drought in the Sudan. The woman's hair, though, was a showpiece, a sunset gold page boy that fell across one eye. With a wig like that, her actual hair must be cropped as close as a man's. Risto thumbed through another few shots. Efta came up, blowing a kiss goodbye. Efta, the Klansman just killed. Efta came up, blowing a kiss goodbye. Next was Juicy, the performance artist. He struck a pose, arms akimbo. My, even at phone size, Juicy looked like a star. Jamie Foxx of the Fleas. One after another, just look. Such a handsome array of colored folk. With a woman like this around, who needed a sandwich? She generated her own nutrition, and she had Risto noticing something new about his photo scrapbook. Other than Paola, he didn't have any white folks. He'd even left out his best client at the gallery. "Oh la la," the stranger continued. "Comme c'est sont bien, sont beaux, comme c'est sont beaux, les Africains comme ça, le sang mixte." The language was the least of what had changed. The voice had dropped a good octave. Small wonder Benetton can't get enough of them, these tawny pelts, the united colors. Risto almost lost hold of his soda. The ads, Benetton, they're the opposite of that old story. Where's it from, that story? The 1001 Nights? Or was it Kipling, his Hindu act? Just So. The one about the leopard who can't change his spots. Why, that's the opposite of what these ads are selling. They're telling you wear our clothes and you're pretty as we are, as whatever color you'd like to become. The right clothes and scrub-a-dub-dub. Who says you're just a old jungle cat? Risto had hiccups. Juicy. The performer tossed back his head. A few colored sticks, an ointment or two, and he had a whole new face. When he laughed, he sounded a dozen years Risto's junior. So fetching a frock, he said. You understand, I simply had to. You of all people, patron of the arts, philosopher of happiness, Aristophanes. You know I had to try. You had to try the frock. Oh, have you forgotten? I'm a featured performer with Expo in Wichita. Risto, the event just begs for something fresh, n'est-ce pas? This weekend, you know, we can't restore the city's cultural credibility in the sort of drab threads you'd see on Madame Maire. Juicy would have 3/4 of an hour on a stage alongside the downtown Galleria. The booking loomed large for him, naturally, a refugee song and dance man who would never play the Opera House. Nonetheless, the Expo, this coming weekend, yes, that offered a stage sanctioned by the city and the Regione. It was a show that ought to lead to better, and why not better legal standing as well? Was that so inconceivable? Up in Rome this summer, there'd been talk of a saner immigration policy. And look at that. A wild notion brought to mind by seeing his friend in drag. Look what the performance artist had set him thinking. Risto knew himself, his densely populated head. These last days, he'd had worse of a crowd than usual up there, yet here, this Pulcinello out of Ethiopia, a man who took a fiendish glee in warping the squares. He teased out stranger thoughts. He'd made his fairy audience aware of how, from time to time in this country, the earth could move. Up in Rome, they were talking. Juicy, he said. You're amazing. Dear boy, frankly, you have no idea. Anyway, continued the performer, wasn't it fitting that they find themselves in the same boat? Wasn't his citizen brother also traveling in disguise? As for me, you know, the clothes unmake the man. This thing of colors, I acknowledge mine. It's what I do, after all. But then there's you. A Gulf breeze snatched away what there was of Risto's laugh. This wig, this frock, they're nothing much. They're but the outward show. And yet, you know, they help me to predict the future. The performer covered his eyes. The nail polish, Risto noticed, matched the eyeshadow. Meantime, extending the other thin arm, reaching toward what? The first black prime minister of Italy? Spirits, he moaned, mesdames, messieurs, révélez votre mystère. Yes, let your marionettes take their places on the stage. Yes, that's us too, this philosopher, detective, and I. Let us take our places. Yes, I see. Tonight we dine at the Americans. Risto got a hand on the outstretched arm, but by then Juicy was letting it drop. Neither of them wanted to risk the attention, and both had the same friend on Capri. My dear Aristophanes, this visit, I made the arrangement ages ago, last week. My business, this visit, it's show business. With a gesture at his bodice, his vacant bodice, Juicy reiterated that his weekend performance included new material. Now, mon Dieu, I imagine that you imagine that a talent such as I has no need of rehearsal. But Juicy gleaned for inspiration, just like everyone else. combing again and again over the performance field. He needed space to workshop, far from prying eyes. And for the former employer, the American setup on the island wasn't so lavish, hardly a villa, as one of the papers had put it. There had been a number of articles after the man emerged from hiding. Still, for Juicy, the house and grounds appeared perfect. And I must tell you, for our friend too, the arrangement has its advantages. Should he have a guest or two, should he have 3, they won't lack for entertainment. Oh la la. But then, with his next breath, Juicy quit sounding like a party boy. You know, if I hadn't been there, Risto, the man's last couple of parties would have felt rather lonesome and meager. Lonesome and meager. The American. The Ethiopian let his page boy head sink between his hands. Hela, I can't offer the man much by way of company. Not while I'm lost amid the baseless fabric of my visions. He straightened up, his gaze serious. Still and all, mon Dieu, tonight's host will hardly be alone in contending with tragedy. Risto should have known. By this time, the news of his clansmen had seeped into the city's cracks. The performer began to offer sympathies. Your last family, your last living link back south, I'm just sick about it. Here on the ferry, Juicy would have swiftly discerned his friend's state, bruised and searching his phone for a bit of cheer. He would have got it at once and figured he had just the remedy. But now, to end the way he did, and after such a strutting, proud brother, I'm just sick about it. To live the way he did, you know. All the proper world now, les flics, Madame Mère, you know they're already starting to slander the man. Risto managed to nod, getting his damaged foot in one hand. At his first grimace, Juicy changed directions again. My brother, Aristofano, do you want an apology? Honestly, I thought you'd see the benefits in a game of pretend, a game between adults. What? Risto snapped. Are you looking for a review? His Mr. Bones took this unfazed. On the other hand, said Juicy, why not, after all? We find ourselves both in the same boat. Why not play pretend? His gesture rolling over took in the entire gulf. We find ourselves here rather than, just for example, on the train down to join the wife and the wee ones. Risto gave himself to the throb of the ferry engine, a kind of massage. Dear boy, Paola and the children, can't you handle them just yet? You'd still prefer, shall we say, a private workshop of your own? Listen, Juicy. Risto sat up formally. There's something else. He found the words to address the gruesome news out of his cousin's apartment and to accept his friend's apology. This stunt, Risto said, making the crossing in drag, it could be it did me some good. It only seemed, he thought, as if everyone was trying to play detective. The game they really enjoyed was doctor. Anyway, Juicy, you're right about Paola and the kids, too. I'm just not up to them yet. While I'm at it, you're right about the police and EFTA. They've all had their eyes on him for years. The performer took this with an affable pout. But, Juicy, something else. That's where I'll start. thanks. That's great. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, especially to Malvern, and I believe we're going to take some questions now.